Well, Lindsey, I'm so excited to have you on the ProgressPure Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. This is such a treat.
This is such a treat. I started following and listening to your podcast. I think it was back in June now, so like kind of in lockdown. And I was like mid in the swing of like dating, and like I'm a millennial and was on dating apps, so it was very much like finding refuge in We Met At Acme. And so thank you for like being a source of kind of like hope and guidance in that time.
Oh, it's an honor.
So firstly, what I'd love is if you could give a little bit of an intro to yourself to people who maybe haven't heard of Meta Acme. And then I have a bunch of other questions, which I'd love to dive into.
Yeah, so I am Lindsey Metselaar. I'm from New York City, and I started this podcast called We Met At Acme over 3 years ago now. I was very much confused when it came to dating. I was broken up with like on my birthday. I thought that I knew so many things, but clearly knew nothing. It was a really humbling experience. And I decided that dating is something that we don't talk about enough. And we're not like as open with that subject as so many other subjects. And I was always so curious about people's dating lives. And so I started We Met at Acme in an effort to have a place to go where people feel like they can relate to other people's experiences, whether positive or negative.
And are you born in New York?
I am. I'm born and raised in New York City.
So was it, because I have heard from across the pond that dating in New York is like London on steroids. I don't know if that's true, but I've heard that when people start dating or they're in that kind of scene, that people are dating like multiple people at once. There isn't so much of a commitment kind of culture. Maybe that's all bullshit, but I'm just curious if that's what you found when you were within that.
No, you're absolutely right. It's really hard to pin anyone down in New York City. I think now is an exception because we're in a pandemic and, everyone's a little lonelier. But normally it's like you have so many options. It's the city of like supermodels. And so it just feels like, especially men are not really taking dating seriously. And you're more likely to find people who are single in their mid 30s and 40s here than probably anywhere else.
Right. God, that really freaks me out. So I'm like, yeah, I'm so excited to move. But also like, that's what I've heard. Like there are loads of models and people don't really want to settle down. And there are like 5 girls to every guy. Like it's crazy.
It's scary, but I can tell you're cute and you have an accent, so you'll be fine.
Stop. That's all I wanted to hear. We can end the podcast now. Okay, so that's really interesting. So you were dating, you were in that scene, and then so you started the podcast. Was that kind of to talk to other people and to share your stories and to see if you could kind of like find other people who were within the same realm as you? And if that was the case, like, did you find that? Was it helpful in talking to other people?
Yeah, it was so helpful. It's so funny because I love my friends to death, but part of me at the time felt like I couldn't even really relate to my friends when it came to dating. I was such a specific dater. Like I was the kind of person that went on like 100 dates and kind of never gave up and always like started anew. And I felt like my friends either were like in serious relationships at the time or like not, they didn't really care for dating. And so I was like, there have to be other people out there like me who are like obsessed with love and obsessed with like, really trying to find something and who get like knocked down a lot, which is really like, it's hard.
Yeah. And so do you believe in true love?
I believe in love. It's so funny. It's like when you say true love, do you mean like the one?
I don't even fucking know. Like right. True love, the one, a soulmate, like all of that stuff. I guess, yeah. Do you believe, well, firstly, do you believe in a soulmate?
So it's so weird because I'm such a hopeless romantic rather, probably helpless too.
Helpless and hopeless.
And actually, when's your birthday? I have to ask.
Oh yeah, I love that you asked this because I love that you're into astrology. December 31st.
Oh, you're a Capricorn.
I am a Capricorn to a T.
So you get it. I'm a Capricorn moon. So I have this Libra sun, which is like, so like, oh my God, romance. But then my Capricorn sun is like, get real. This is not reality. Yes. Like be a realist. And so part of me wants to say yes, but the other part of me knows that like come down to earth. Like everyone, like not everyone, anyone can be the one in a way, if it works. I think if you meet someone and things just align and it's perfect, like that's not perfect, but close to it. That's as close to a soulmate as you can get. But I think especially in, 2021, it's like, there's not just one person for everyone. Like I think you have the opportunity to have a lot of love in your life. And if you find someone that you can make it work with, for as long as you're alive, then that's as close to a soulmate as you can get.
And when you say meeting someone and it kind of aligning, do you mean like, what would define that for you? Is that like when you meet someone and you have an instant connection? Is that like when you meet someone and both your lives are really compatible? Is there a way that you can like quantify how you know if you two are going to align well together, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think, it has, and like, you can quote me on this, it has less to do with astrology and more to do with your shared interests, and if you get on with each other's families and, can relate to each other. And that took me a long time to figure out, because I was so like, oh, you have to have completely different backgrounds. You have to come from different cultures. Like that's what keeps it interesting. That's what, you learn about them so much. And like, you don't have things in common. I think now, at least with my partner that I have now, like we grew up in a similar way. And I don't mean like financially. I mean, like we liked the same music growing up. We knew about the same like trends and the same, TV shows and things like that. And I think those little things surprisingly matter like a lot more as you get older, because you want to be able to like say to your kids like, oh my God, when your dad and I were growing up, like we used to do this, as opposed to like, oh, when your dad was growing up, he did this, but when I was growing up, I did that. And it's just like, it is something that actually does bond you. And it helps you understand each other.
That's so funny. I literally went on a walk today with one of my best friends, and I was saying to her, like, when I was younger, I think I was more drawn to the idea, not even to people, because I wasn't like dating that much when I was younger, but like drawn to the idea of meeting someone who was like different and from like a totally different part of the world and had really different interests. And then like I had just re-downloaded Hinge because I've like just had a breakup, and I was looking on Hinge, and I realized like while I was on it, wow, I'm kind of just looking for people who are kind of like me unintentionally, like people who have had those similar things. So I guess that kind of makes a lot of sense, that you actually kind of look for people subconsciously or not that you have like strong similarities with.
Yeah. And it's so funny because I, the same as you. And it's just like, it seems, so there's this book and it's called Modern Romance by Aziz Ansari. And it talks about how back in the day, everyone married like their neighbor or like their best family friend or
Their
just
cousin.
like they're literally their cousin. And I was reading it like years ago and I was like, this is so weird. And now that I think about the couples, because I have so many married friends, I think, wow, these are people that did grow up on the same block type of thing. Or these are people that, we all grew up together and we were all in the same circle and then they connected later. And so I do think that there is something there that's like, innate in us that like we are attracted to, and it does work with someone a lot similar to ourselves than we think. And I don't mean personality wise.
And what do you think about being attracted to like the whole, okay, not like to this extent, but the whole Freudian idea that you want to have sex with your dad and like, and then guys want to like sleep with their mom or whatever. Do you think there's any truth in you are drawn to partners who are similar, resemble your parents in some kind of way?
1000%. And
Really?
I think also though, I have to give, way for people who like maybe don't have great parents or don't have good relationships with their parents. I think that's the exception. Like if you have like a shitty dad or a shitty mom, you want to go the opposite, and that I respect. But I think if you have a good relationship with your parents, you like love them, respect them, etc., then that is so spot on. And I think, for me, I was subconsciously, like on no conscious level, dating people who were different from my dad for so long. And I think my partner is very similar to him on so many levels, and just like, has like the same like warmth and the same like friendliness and little things that you don't, it's not like, he looks like my dad. That would be crazy. But like, it's this like, these like core personality traits that really mean a lot to you. Do you find that you have dated people that are similar to your parents?
I don't know. So I've had weird relationship history. Like I had one boyfriend and we went out for nearly like 7 years, and like he was my first everything. And then we broke up a couple of years ago. And since then I've only ever had one boyfriend that lasted for a month, and we broke up like last week. But apart from that, like I have dated people in between, and I don't know. Like I'm not not 100% sure if any of them, I mean, to some extent, like there are some qualities I go for, like my dad is Israeli. So like, I'm kind of the people who are a bit more like Middle Eastern and like have a little bit of chutzpah and like are a bit cheeky. Like I am drawn to those types, and people who are, I guess to have that kind of same warmth as my dad, like to some extent for sure. But I think that I won't really know until I've kind of like settled down in a longer term relationship with someone, can see that through, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Can I ask how old you are?
Yeah, I'm 25.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a feeling you'll end up, it's so funny that you said your dad is Israeli, because Israeli guys, from my experience, but like you tell me if I'm wrong, they're very like aggressive, but not in a bad way.
Yeah.
And like they really go for it. And I feel like that's such a good quality. So who knows? Maybe you'll find that.
Yeah, I think for sure they can be. I think that in Israel, the kind of culture they're brought up with is you never know fully how long, like I know it sounds super deep, but like you don't really know how long you're going to live for, like especially if you live in Israel, like every day is like more or less a threat. And so I think as well, and in combination with the army, they have such a, you have to kind of like lay all your cards on the table and like be as upfront as you can, because that's kind of just in their culture and in their blood.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, it is nice. It's nice when you meet people who kind of cut to the chase as well, especially when in terms of dating, people can just go like around and around the loops and like not really tell you how they feel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I have to ask, Acme, is that a restaurant?
It is a restaurant, and downstairs, so not right now, obviously in Corona, but downstairs is like a secret speakeasy bar lounge type thing.
Oh.
I don't even know if it's a secret. I think everyone knows about it at this point, but there's like, a bouncer and you have to get in, and it's been around for a while. And when I was single and started the podcast, I was going out there all the time, meeting people there, but no one that inspired the name, other than the fact that I just like the name. But it's funny because this one guy that I did meet there is like, oh my God, she made the podcast about me. I'm like, no, sweetie.
Guys love to stroke their own ego sometimes.
Love. It's ridiculous.
I don't know why, but I've spoken to so many guys where I know that the girls or whoever they were dating weren't into them, and they're like, she was so into me, like she was laughing all my jokes. And it's like, that's like a primal mechanism that girls like just do. Like, doesn't mean she's in love with you.
Literally. And girls are the total opposite. They're like, oh, he was never into me. It was never anything.
So you were dating for a while. So you started the podcast in 2017. So when did you meet the partner that you have now? And what did your dating kind of life look like up until that point?
Yeah. So a lot of trial and error.
Yeah.
I kind of had always, so going back to the modern romance book, like I'd always known my now partner, I'll just say his name, Steven. But I never knew him well. It was like, if we were at a party, we'd be like, hi, but we really didn't know each other. We just knew each other's names. He went to high school with one of my best friends from college. And so never like thought of each other like that really. Also, I was always in relationships, and so was he. Actually, he wasn't really, but whatever. And so my journey of dating until I met him, again, like trial and error. I dated this one guy, and he like really cared about the podcast, and he always was so paranoid, like, oh my God, are you going to say this about me? Are you going to say that about me? It was like no.
Yeah.
I dated another guy who was great, but just wasn't my person. And, you know, just a lot of dates in between. And then I was lucky enough to reconnect with Steven like 2 months before quarantine happened. We ran into each other.
Oh, no
And
way.
it kind of hit me. I was like, oh my God, this great guy is single. Like, how did I not realize this? And so I actually asked him out because I was just coming out of a relationship at the time. And so he didn't know I was single. And that's how our journey began.
I love that you asked him out. I don't think girls do it enough.
So yes and no.
Okay.
I did it because I knew that he would say yes, which I know sounds like annoying, but for the most part, I think that a woman should be pursued, but I think it's okay to at least make yourself known and then like let them come to you. So I agree. I think you can ask a guy out if confidently, like, or if you know that like he'll say yes, and then let them like chase you from there. But I think, yeah, it was definitely not in my set of rules, but I think it worked for the best.
It's so funny because you saying that a girl, it's kind of like in a better position if they are chased. Like, I absolutely do not disagree with you. And I think that especially as you get older, like my mom, she is experienced in like dating. And I think fundamentally one of the biggest things that she's learned, and it's kind of an echo of what you're saying, is you know, if they like you, you will know and you will be chased by them. Like, they won't let you just hang around and be single, and you know, you won't be sitting at home on a Saturday night going, well, maybe he's just not on his phone. But it's difficult because at the same time I want to, you know, encourage people and tell people like, well, you know, you never know the circumstances. Like, maybe you should put yourself out there more, and like maybe you should ask. And I think that that's like a behavior that I would want to encourage. But at the same time, it's like, but it is kind of better to like hang back and play a bit of a game and be a bit more chilled and see if they do come around, you know?
Yeah, no, exactly. I think there has to be that like push and pull aspect of it. There can't be just like, you know, as a woman, it sucks. And like, trust me, I'm all about feminism, but it's like, you do need that reassurance. Like, you know, your mom's absolutely right.
Yeah. And so before you were with Stephen and you were like going on dates and stuff, were you mostly meeting people from apps, or was it like people that you knew as well from school, or?
It was a mix. So I actually, funny enough, never really dated anyone in like my circle or extended circle because again, like I really liked to find someone that was different than me. And so before I was dating Steven, I dated really mostly from apps. And so my last boyfriend, we met on an app. He was actually British, like you, or English rather. He would hate when I said British instead of English. And so he was like technically a stranger. And then the person before that I had met at a party. So that was more of like in the circle, but not too close in the circle. So yeah, it was like kind of a mix.
Okay, so did you go on that many first dates, or were they kind of like the two serious relationships you had from dating?
I went on tons of dates and I would say that they were the closest to serious that I found. But yeah.
And how did you tell? Because you said the second guy that you were seeing, you were seeing him, and then you kind of knew that he wasn't your person. How did you know? Was it like just a gut feeling, or?
I think it was a gut feeling. I think we became more friends by the end of our dating than romantic. And there was so much love there, but it really became such like a friendship type love. And we weren't like as intimate, and we, you know, had fights, and there were certain things, you know, going back to like shared common interests. And when I met him, I was not sober. And then through dating him, I became sober, and so many things about me changed. And so whereas maybe I would have liked to like go to a rave until 4 a.m. pre-sobriety, like post-sobriety, I was like, I wanted to be in bed, I wanted to wake up early and work out. So I think when I had chose him as my partner, I was really different. So it was really me that like grew out of it. Whereas he was like the same great guy that I had fallen for, but I had changed so much.
Right. Okay. And so then did you end it?
I did, but I hate the whole like who broke up
Yeah.
with who thing, because like it really was mutual towards the end. And I've caught myself kind of saying like I ended it, and it's like it just like it brings back like bad vibes from like when I was younger and got broken up with, because it's like who cares? Like it
Yeah.
takes two people to end a relationship, and I think if I hadn't ended it, like it would have been done
Yeah.
regardless.
Right. Okay. So it was kind of a mutual thing of like you both kind of knew with this is not going to like last long term. And so it
Yeah,
wrapped up.
exactly. I just had to be the one to be like, okay.
Yeah, it's funny because I think that even though sometimes you both know that it's coming to an end or something's not quite right, it does take like courage from one person to be like, we need to talk about this at some point because like it's just going downhill.
Yeah, it's hard. No one wants to be the bad guy.
Okay, so then you meet Stephen and you ask him out and he says yes. And how was the first date? Were you nervous?
I was nervous. I actually was nervous. I was at a brunch with for my friend's birthday before. We actually had a day date. It was like a 3 p.m. date. We were getting coffee, and so I was at a brunch before, and I was very much like I didn't want to jinx it. So like I told like two girls at the brunch, but I was like, I'm just meeting this guy. Like he seems to be like, who knows? Who knows?
Yeah. It's cash.
Right. It's cash. Meanwhile, I had like a full face of makeup done in the middle of the day.
Nails, everything.
Literally. And I was a little nervous. And then he had a very familiar vibe to me. Like it was like, again, going back to like, grew up in a similar way, like knew some of the same people. And so I felt a little bit more comfortable with him probably than I have with people in the past. And it was a nice, coffee date. And it was nice. It was like he's probably the first person I dated that our first date was like a day date, which is like definitely not as common.
Yeah. And I remember listening into one of your podcasts, and correct me if I'm wrong, but was it that you really liked him from the moment that you met him? And so because of that reason, you felt like you had to kind of see and date other people so that you didn't put all your eggs into one basket?
Yes, it was so scary. I was like so nervous about how I felt about him. I remember telling my therapist, like, I really like this person. And, I'm very much, and maybe this is like the Capricorn in me, like I like to be in control of the situation. And I like to be the one who knows, like, no, like I'm not getting hurt, I'm not putting myself out there, I'm not being vulnerable. And so immediately having feelings for him was so vulnerable for me, especially coming out of a relationship, especially one that I felt like I had a little bit more control over. And so I was really scared. And I said to my therapist, like, I don't know what to do. And she literally said to me, she was like, well, strap in. And I was like, no, I don't want to strap in. And I had to keep dating others because I was like, if this doesn't work out, I'm going to be probably more upset than I normally would be.
Yeah. So do you think would you recommend that for people who, if they meet someone who they really like, do you think, and why do you think that, is it potentially important to make sure that you are dating multiple people?
Yes, I think it's so important. And I think, it's so obvious if you're not dating other people and you're way more available and you are inevitably more vulnerable. And also, like, it's good to have the compare and contrast.
It's funny. I think that's one of the biggest differences, and maybe I'm wrong and I don't know, but I feel like that is one of the biggest differences between dating in New York and dating in London. Like I was speaking to one of my friends who lives in New York, and she was saying that here you just assume everybody is dating like 3 or 4 people at once. Whereas in London, it's really quite normal that when you meet someone to assume, oh, we're just dating each other. And then people kind of, especially being English, I think it'd be really interesting to hear what it's like for New Yorkers, or Americans in general, but English people, I think, there's this kind of common stereotype that like we can't talk about our feelings, and we're like, yep, everything's fine. No, if you're seeing 4 other people, even though I'm in love with you, like that's totally fine. And so I think we all just like to assume that it's not happening. But do you think, is it different in New York or with Americans maybe when you start seeing someone, like how quickly, and obviously this is massive generalizations, but like how quickly typically do your friends, or have you found people to kind of like initiate the conversation of, are we taking this further? Are we not? What are we kind of thing?
I think New Yorkers are actually more similar to English people than you think in terms of like or maybe it's just a millennial thing. Like we play the game of like, who cares less?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it probably takes about at least 2 months, usually, maybe one, for someone to say like, okay, I'm invested in this. Like, I don't want you, seeing anyone else. Like, I want you to be my girlfriend, or I want you to be my boyfriend. And I think that's a mix of wanting to protect yourself and also wanting to see what else is out there and making sure that you're making the right decision.
Mm-hmm. And so when did you know, okay, you like Steven, you're dating other people. When do you, like, who takes the plunge and being like, hey, I kind of want this to be something serious?
Well, I kind of knew right away, but, and I like to think that he did too.
Yeah.
At least from our second date. But I mean, I was ready, but I knew that another reason I had to date people was because I was newly single. And so if I had then been with him, now until let's say forever, I would have been like, well, I never had like 2 seconds to see what was going on when I was single at that moment. And I think for him, I kind of have like, it's kind of easier for me to express how I feel because I have a podcast and he can listen to it and hear it. And so many times in the podcast, I would be like, if you want to date, if you want someone to be your girlfriend, you have to ask, will you be my girlfriend?
I love that. Amazing.
And over, and like, hope the message got there. And it did. And I remember he referenced me as his girlfriend before he had asked me. And I was like, just so you know, if you want me to be your girlfriend, you have to ask. And
did you say that to him?
I said that verbatim.
Amazing. Was he like, oh, okay?
He was like, oh, okay, but he didn't ask in that moment. So I was like, okay, that's interesting. And then it was like, 3 weeks later, he had asked me in like a more formal way, and it was sweet.
That's really sweet. What do you think about the necessity of people asking in formal ways, like, hey, will you be my boyfriend? Do you think that's important?
I do think it's important, but I also think that if it's less formal, that's fine too. Like if let's say someone calls you their girlfriend and you're like, wait, what? And they're like, oh yeah, I thought you were my girlfriend. And you're like, oh, okay, yeah. Like that's also fine. But there has to be some sort of conversation about it.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I do agree. I'm kind of traditional. Like I like it, the formality of, hello, will you be my partner? But yeah, I do agree with you on that. And so you felt a connection as soon as you met him. Did you kind of feel like, oh, he's the one?
So going back to our the one conversation, I don't know if I immediately was like, oh my God, he's the one, as much as like, oh my God, he is someone that I could really see myself with, and someone that I really want to be with and that I don't want to change, which I think is a huge thing, because especially as women, like we're such fixers and we want to change and we want to like find some project and change it. But he, to me, was like, kind of like a finished person in his own right. So that I really was turned on by.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like I can't, it's so sad, but I can't even imagine meeting someone in a romantic realm where I'm like, you as you are is perfect. Like,
that's why you have to date older.
I know, that's what everyone says at the moment. Everyone is like, you need to date people who are at least 30 if you're like 25.
Yeah, it's true.
And how was it developing a relationship during lockdown? And because do you guys live with each other?
We do, yeah.
So how did that evolve?
So once New York City went into lockdown, which was a very serious situation, as I'm sure it was in London as well, we kind of had no choice but to decide right then and there, are we quarantining together or are we quarantining apart? And if we're quarantining apart, we're not going to see each other because that's not safe to like keep going back and forth to our places. And so, we had only been like 2 months in. We weren't.
Oh, wow.
We weren't official, but we really wanted to be with each other. And I think both of us like didn't really know how to go about it because so many of our friends were going to stay with their parents, like, in the suburbs or upstate or whatnot. And we kind of looked at each other and decided like we don't want to go be with our parents, like just alone, like me and my parents, him and his parents, but instead we'd rather be together. So we were one of the few people that stayed in New York City. And he was here at my apartment for that time. And so it was really a bonding experience. Be like, we're doing TikTok dances, the whole thing. And I'm so happy that we made that decision, because I think I was so nervous that it could go one of two ways at that point.
And it did for so many people. Like, I've heard so many stories of people who, I mean, that is literally amazing. I feel like you guys are a lottery ticket, and the fact that you went from dating for 2 months and then being like, we're going to move in with each other before you're even like boyfriend and girlfriend.
It was truly insane. And then we actually ended up going to my parents a few months later in April, I think it was end of April. And so it was like we went from 0 to 1,000, because he was then living with my parents who he'd never met.
Wow. I have massive respect for you two for that. Like, seriously, I think you should pat yourself both on the back as that being like an unbelievable sign, because I've heard of people who were going to get married and then with lockdown happened and they moved in, and then one of them was just like, I can't do this anymore, like we've got to end this.
I've heard a lot of those stories as well.
So one thing that I did want to talk about on this podcast, as we're kind of, moving from 2020 to 2021, even though arguably we are properly in 2021 now, some things that I experience, that people experience on the daily when they're dating, is some of these like bad etiquette things within the dating realm, whether that be ghosting, breadcrumbing, benching. A lot of these terms are new ones, so I'm like, I've never heard of that before. And so I just wanted to get your opinion on some dating bad etiquette things that we should leave in 2020, and if you've had any experiences with things like ghosting or breadcrumbing or any other terms that maybe I haven't heard of.
Yeah, I think I definitely have. And if anyone says they haven't, they have to be lying. I have experienced ghosting. I've probably ghosted before. I don't really remember it, but it should 100% be left in the past. I think, we actually have a highlight on our Instagram called anti-ghost text. And it's all these options where instead of ghosting somebody, you can actually just say, use one of these drafts to explain yourself a little bit and really respect that person. I think if somebody ghosts you, like, they're not worth your time. And breadcrumbing is, I think if I remember, it's like slowly fading out, or it's like leaving you little crumbs as you go. Maybe it's that one.
Yeah. So I think it is. Yeah.
I think that one, it's like, it's always going to happen because people don't know what they're doing. At least when people are ghosting, like, they know exactly what they're doing. When people are breadcrumbing, it's such like a selfish thing that they don't know how it's like affecting the other person. I think, obviously this could all be fixed if people went to therapy and became more self-aware, but let's just hope that happens in the future.
With therapy, I have never done therapy, and it's something I really want to do. How long have you been doing it for? And is it something you absolutely recommend to everybody?
Absolutely recommend. I know it's like, controversial in England, but I will say it is really life-changing. And when I first had heard about therapy and, people I knew went to therapy, I was like, I don't want to go to someone who's just going to give me a pat on the back and tell me I'm doing great. Mm-hmm. And it's really not like that. It's whatever you want it to be. And so if you go into therapy and you have a goal in mind, whether it's like to get along with your dad better, or to have better control over your emotions, whatever it might be, then you really get so much out of it. And so for me, like, I've become a lot more self-aware. I've had improved relationships with my family members and been able to control certain negative emotions. So I highly recommend it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely want to check it out. I feel like if we can bring encourage more like dating etiquette and like styles of behavior, maybe everyone, number one, start off by going to therapy and then start dating other people. Exactly. So is there anything that in 2021 you would like to see more of? Like you mentioned the anti-ghosting highlights on your Instagram feed. Are there any other styles of behavior that you think would be helpful for millennials dating?
I think, just being like, yes, people, I really think it's so important to like throw out a checklist if you have one of what you want your partner to exactly be like. I feel like it's such bullshit. Like nobody gets everything on their checklist, and nobody, you know, like you just have to think outside the box and be open and be willing. And it's so much about like how somebody makes you feel than if they went to an Ivy League school or if they have, you know, 3 dogs, whatever's on your checklist.
3 dogs, amazing.
And so I think just like be more open-minded as, you know, the new year progresses.
Yeah, one of my best friends was talking about something quite nice that in terms of dating, I think her therapist actually said to her that was like, when you're nervous and before you go on a date and you have expectations for how somebody should behave, like if you can try and drop those and just let them surprise you, like don't have X, Y, and Z of how you think they're going to behave, but like really try and sit in front of that person and take them in as like a human being that's just existing right there, like living through their own experiences that they've been in, and let them surprise you rather than guessing how they're going to behave constantly.
I couldn't agree more. I think expectations are the worst thing that you could ever have. And, you know, if you go into a date just at the very least hoping to make a new friend, then you'll always be pleasantly surprised. But if you go in and you're, you know, hoping to meet the love of your life, like you have to get over that. I think you never know, but the best thing you can do for yourself and your mental health is to have no expectations and just enjoy the process.
Yeah, that's really nice what you just said about going into it thinking, can I make a new friend, rather than what can they do for me? You know, what things do they have that they can offer me? But that's a really nice thing, because if you ultimately can't develop a friendship and want qualities that they have as a friend that you respect, then like you can't really build much more on that.
Exactly. And that really is true. Like if it doesn't work out, maybe you will be able to be friends with that person. Who knows?
Mm-hmm. And as somebody now who is coupled up, as they say on Love Island,
Literally.
do you and do your friends who are married, is there, you know, there's always this concept of like the grass is greener, you know, when you're single, you're like, I want to be in a relationship. I imagine it's not the case if you're in a relationship with someone that you love, but do you think that statement is true? Like, do you ever get times, and this is like quite a deep question, but do you ever get times where you're like, oh, I wish I was single for a day or anything like that?
I think everyone does. I think, as you said, though, if you're in a good relationship, like when you have that feeling, it's less because you want to be with other people and more because like you want to do whatever you want. You want space, like you want to go on a trip tomorrow alone. But I think what I have been told, which really sticks with me, is the grass is greener where you water it.
Oh, that's actually lovely.
Yeah. And so, like, if you water your own grass, then it's actually going to be greener wherever you are. So, when you're thinking and trying to think, like, oh, I could have this, I could have that, what else is out there? Just make it nicer where you are.
So, could you also say that's kind of like, if you're wherever you are, if you've made this decision to be there, like nourishing that and seeing what you can do to kind of like give back into the ground and let that grass be greener and kind of like give it your love and care, I guess.
Exactly.
That's really beautiful. I've never heard that before. Thank you.
Of course.
And so most of my listeners are aged between kind of 23 to 27. They are millennials, they are dating, etc. Do you have any advice that you could give people, leave people with, that might give people hope during this like COVID dating crazy whirlwind of a time, or in unhappy relationships, or anything that you've learned that, yeah, you'd like to impart your wisdom?
So I'm going to do 2 separate ones, one for the people who are alone and one for the people who might be in a relationship they want to get out of. So for the people who are alone, there is somebody out there that is looking for exactly what you have. So even though it might seem bleak now, or maybe you're doing like a Galentine's Day and you just want to like kill all the girls you're with, there is something out there and someone out there for you. Like the statistics are in your favor. So try to enjoy the moment, because sooner than you think, you know, you'll be coupled up and you won't be able to have those moments and that freedom and, you know, not having to be affected by anyone else's mood and all that stuff. And then for people who are coupled up and might be unhappy, you really, truly, you don't have to be unhappy and you don't have to settle. And there, again, like similar to with the singles, like there is somebody out there that has what you want. And so don't just accept things. Don't just stay in something because it's been your norm. It's never too late to make a change and to really go for something you really want.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Lindsay. I think that was really lovely.
Thanks,
I think that we can wrap that up there. I think you've given like awesome advice and like what an amazing insight into your and Steven's relationship. So I massively appreciate you coming on to the Progress Pure pod. People can find you at We Met at Acme, right? And you also have the food page, Don't Expect Salads.
Yes. If you're a foodie, check it out.